So let's get into it. Let's go to, let's bring this up. So we got Garry McCarthy, Superintendent, Chicago PD, Deputy Commissioner, NYPD Operations, Director in Newark. Quite a stellar career, Garry. I know Garry probably 26 years, 27 years when you first no, in fact, the first time I met you when you became the Deputy Commissioner of Operations. So that was in 2000, right? January 2000, is that about right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, my last day in uniform in the NYPD was Y2K. I was in the 7-0 at the time. And I was, if I remember correctly, I think Y2K landed on a Saturday. And naturally, everybody's working. It's 12 o'clock, and it sounds like Beirut on Flatbush Avenue.
Yep.
And I decided everybody just into the station house and chill out for a little bit. Hopefully they run out of ammunition and we could go back on patrol. And
well, fast forward to all these years later, and here you are on Fox News with Martha McCallum and the DNC 2024 in Chicago. Quite a career, Garry, quite a ride. But the way you open this segment on wearing the badge, it talks about a really interesting comment that I was blown away when I saw it. 9/11 and September 12th and where we are now. So I'm going to play that if that's okay, and then love to hear your perspective on this. So let's see if I can get this up here.
Survivor at the World Trade Center. And post 9/11 in 2001, we were the greatest heroes in the world. First responders, firemen, police officers, EMTs, and so on. And somehow, you know, and being sarcastic the way I am, people would say to me, you know, people are never going to forget this. And I remember saying on 9/11, I said, they'll forget by tomorrow. They'll forget by 9/12. And I'm not sure I was that wrong, because policing in this country has just been kicked under the rug. And as a result, we're going to talk about what that means, violence against the police. And I'm going to trace a lot of this back. I'm a history buff. We're going to talk a little bit about history. And like I said, post 9/11, we were the greatest people on earth. Ferguson, 2014, police shooting. And something that kind of blew my mind was the fact that the state's attorney in painstaking detail went through the entire process of the grand jury and detailed for at least an hour, maybe even an hour and a half, why he didn't indict the officer who shot and killed Michael Brown. And as a result, Ferguson blew up. But the thing that there's a couple of takeaways from Ferguson that people don't realize. The first one is, and I said this way back then, the police can turn a demonstration into a riot. And I believe that's what happened in Ferguson. You don't put SWAT officers with rifles on the front line when people are protesting. That goes way back in history to May 4th, 1970, Kent State shooting with the National Guard. But it gets worse than that, because while the officer was justified by the grand jury in everything that he did, the fallout from it was fumbled completely by the police. And I had the opportunity to sit down and listen to the colonel of the Missouri State Police, I believe it was, or maybe it was the county of St. Louis, who took over on the third day of that riot. And the things that he said were just astounding. And he's talking to police chiefs across the country. And he said, you know, I took over on the third day, and every night it seemed when I got home and I went to take off my tie, things erupted. And I'm saying to myself, what were you doing home if you had a riot going on? It doesn't stop at curfew. It kind of goes up from there. But then he went on to talk about the whole thing. And if you remember, there's a famous picture of a police officer on top of a Bearcat, which is an armored vehicle. And he's pointing a rifle into the crowd. And naturally, that gins the crowd up. And people are going crazy. And the colonel says, well, I looked over and I saw that, and I sent one of my guys over and I said, go find out what he's doing up there with that rifle. And when my guy came back, he told me, well, he's using a scope to look into the crowd. And I said to myself, there's these things called binoculars. You don't have to point a rifle into a crowd, which is only going to enrage them more. And in my estimation, that was the case where it was fumbled, completely fumbled by the police. The more this guy talked, the worse it got. And we were all embarrassed by it. The point of Ferguson that I want to get to is the fact that the Attorney General of the United States went to Ferguson after the officer was not indicted and said that this was a complete miscarriage of justice and we could never let this happen again. Well, he's in charge of the justice system, and he's pointing the finger at the police. And I think that was a breaking point as far as police-community relations.
Okay. So I think you're right. The public relations side, again, I'm not there, I'm here, I'm home, I'm watching this, and the public relations was terrible, all their actions. But when the president comes out and says the things that he said, and the Justice Department, to your point, I mean, it was just a collide of bad things that happened. So go ahead, guys.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I would like to see, and forgive me, Gary, I don't want to offend anybody. Perf. I've seen some of these organizations not do, in my opinion, a good enough job of standing up for law enforcement, and I'd say some are actually pulling to the left. Perf perhaps being the biggest violator of that, from what I've seen. With that whole Guardians versus Warrior battle that they had for some time. I'm like, really? I mean, it almost seemed nonsensical. I would like to see leadership lead. And in that regard, like I said, I'd like to see some of these organizations be a little bit more vocal about taking the handcuffs off the police and having us get back to cops being cops. And look, as we said before on this podcast, no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. We want to see good policing. We want to see effective policing. I walked the beat. Best time of my career, because the police are from the community from the police. We need to get back to that. Community policing worked, but we've let them pull us in the wrong direction, and no one's really leading the charge to get back to center, I would say, at least not vocally enough.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that, and it's funny because the thing that I was going to say, and Tom, you were asking, how do we get back to center on this stuff, and it has to do with leadership. But I'm going to tell you something that Bill Bratton said, and I believe it to be true. He says, think back, and I think about this all the time. When I went to Newark, Chuck Ramsey was in Philadelphia, or D.C. Then he went to Philadelphia. Kathy Lanier took over D.C. Bill Bratton was in L.A. And so on down the line. Ed Davis was in Boston. And there was just a whole cadre of really talented, ballsy leaders who were out there doing those jobs. And, it all started, to my recollection, with Bill Bratton when he came to New York with Giuliani. He said, no, we're not doing that anymore. This is what we're going to do. And it succeeded. But guess what? They've abandoned it because of politics. So the thing that Bill Bratton said that I agree with, he says, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, all these different police chiefs across the country, and we were all succeeding at the same time. And leadership throw a dart at a map and come up with a star of a police chief. I'm not sure there's so many of them out there today, quite frankly.
No.
But I'm going to tell you to keep your eye on St. Louis, because Bob Tracy, who came out of the NYPD,
rockstar,
he came into Chicago with me, and I recreated Deputy Commission Operations job for him. He was the chief of crime control strategies.
Right.
When I got fired, he went to Wilmington, Delaware. He succeeded there. I asked him if he looked around the Corvette and found any top secret documents, but he didn't tell me anything. After Wilmington, so he's getting He's in Wilmington getting awards from then President Trump for his crime reduction efforts, which is pretty fascinating. Then he goes to St. Louis, and after 2 years, he is succeeding wildly, using all the processes that we created in New York, that we took to Newark, then we took to Chicago, and we were able to make them Chicago-centric and Newark-centric based upon what was going on. And that's what he's doing in St. Louis. So after 2 years of success, just like when I got to Newark and people were clamoring for a U.S. attorney to come in and do civil rights investigations in Newark, people have been clamoring at the state level in Missouri to take over the St. Louis Police Department at the state level, which guess what? Happened about 6 months ago. And the governor has said, leave Bob Tracy alone. He's basically my guy, and he's going to stay the chief because of the job that he's doing.
Yeah.
I think Bob Tracy is a guy that you can hang it. If I had to bet on somebody, I'd put everything on Bob Tracy right now.
Okay, so there's one
I agree.
Bobby's a great guy.
Dennis Irishman, like
that's one agency. Maybe he goes on to one more job. Maybe the missus lets him do that or not, move one more time. But what about the rest of the country? And what about where are these leaders going to come from who are going to really get in these places and run these police departments the way we've seen them run in the past? And we know they can be run.
I think that it would be almost an opening of the floodgates type of thing, like Bill Bratton did in New York. When New York succeeded the way it did, people across the country started emulating what we were doing, right? They didn't say, oh, we're not doing it. Oh, in Chicago, they also said, after I left, we're not doing that New York shit anymore. And I said, you mean stopping people from dying? Yeah, we did. We stopped doing it. It's fine. Yeah, that's what we do.
Well, but the other part of the equation that we did not deal with in New York, Gary, maybe you dealt with it in Illinois. I don't know that you did, but maybe you did, was the woke prosecutor. Prosecutors who don't want to put people in jail. There's another part of the equation that I don't know how that turns around. But it factors into what the police are allowed to do, no doubt.
I missed what you said.
The advent of the woke prosecutor, something that in my
woke
never dealt with.
Yeah.
So I mean, how does it? I mean, that also affects law enforcement leadership because you have to kind of
without a doubt.
So,
without a doubt. You know, Cook County was referred to as Crook County instead. Look at Jesse Smollett. They had to get a special prosecutor to prosecute him.
Right.
And now we've got Eileen O'Neill Burke, who's a former judge, and she is no joke, as my wife Kristen says. So things are starting to turn in that direction. And, these things happen in cycles. And right now, we've got Trump in the White House, and he's just not going to take nonsense. He's doing what he wants to do, what he thinks is right. And I think that the politics are swinging back as people see how people are getting hurt.
You've just watched a clip from our live episode. Click the description to watch the full episode. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this.